Welcome back to the C-Suite. I'm Danielle Jaworski. In this segment, if you are working for an organization where potentially you're seeing the great resignation happen and you're not quite sure why, or as an individual, the job you've been doing, which has been fine up until this point, all of a sudden isn't feeling just right, it may be coming down to your values. Here to talk about the impact of values on your decision making and your influence is Jennifer Hanna. She's a leadership development specialist, and we're going to be diving into the impact of values on individuals and organizations. Welcome, Jennifer, to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and nerd out on this particular topic. It's very timely.
It is because, again, I was saying like there's all these disconnects happening, and I believe that it comes down to values. So to start, can you share more about really what is or are values?
It's such a good question. And it's funny, I've run sessions with leaders trying to help them come down to what their core values are. And what we're really talking about when we talk about core, we're talking about those things that you believe are most important in life. It doesn't matter the context, it doesn't matter the situation. It's what you value most. And it isn't a guiding principle. It isn't what you choose to say is important or what you think should be important. It almost feels like it's embedded within who you are and almost part of your DNA. And so it becomes really important for people to do the work. And it actually is work. We take people through a lot of steps to identify these core values, because when they're aligned, you're moving through life and things are aligning with them. And when you're not aligned, what's happening is you're having a lot of discomfort, you're having a lot of anger, you're having a lot of frustration. And for organizations, the same thing can happen both internally and externally with customers. If we don't know what drives us at our core, it's very difficult to make decisions that align with our purpose and meaning in terms of what we're searching for in life.
Mm-hmm. And can your core values change over time?
Very good question, very common. It is very, very unlikely, because when we talk about core, we're talking about only 2 or 3 values, which is really difficult for people to get down to. But these are ones that stay with you, or you can go back in time and see they existed in every context, no matter what job you picked, what kind of family you had, where you decided to live, they're always there. I think people think they know their values, but when it comes down to it, they can name 10 or 15. And when you're talking at that number, you're losing meaning. You really have to get down to those 2 or 3. And that's where you really get to what's important, and you're able to make decisions and understand your relationships, understand your organization, understand your employee engagement once you've done that work.
Mhm. So it sounds like if they don't change, it could just be over time that you become more aware of them, potentially the influence that they have on your decision
Right.
making and what you're doing. Okay.
Right. The core ones won't change. I mean, I hate to speak in absolutes, but I've rarely ever seen it. Thought leaders in this area don't, acknowledge that usually happens. They really stay with you from when you were young all the way till you're older. So yeah, they're permanent, and they are very few.
And so when you're looking at these core values, what are you seeing right now for trends when it comes to individuals and organizations?
It's really interesting because when you're talking about the great resignation that's happening right now, it really aligns with what I would see in sessions with individual leaders. And what would happen when they go through this process of identifying core values, they're able to actually understand why their job is so satisfying, or why certain parts of their job are so satisfying, or why relationships with their manager or with their team are so great, or vice versa, why they're struggling, why they're unhappy, why they're stressed. And so when people are able to actually start thinking about their values, and as we, talked about another time together, the pandemic has really forced a lot of us to experience core values. Even if we haven't identified them, they're coming up for us in terms of our emotions. When you actually identify them, I think that's what empowers you to make decisions that align with them. So when people have been going through this pandemic, they're thinking and feeling, this isn't right. I'm upset. Everything's been kind of exponentially magnified. And this is where that core value piece comes in. People really need to understand them so that they can understand, why is it I'm leaving my job? Why is it I'm unhappy? Why is it this isn't working for me? And so leaders that do it are usually quite empowered to understand their circumstance and decide what they want to do next. There's also research showing that Individuals and organizations, when they identify core values, even if the core values don't align with the organization, they have greater commitment to the organization because now they've been empowered to understand their role, their preferences, what drives them, and have those conversations that allow them to move their job in directions that focuses on what they love, what gives them meaning, versus those things that actually deflate them and pull away from what is core and what they want. So it's interesting.
Mhm. When you look at organizational values, because organizations are made up of many, many people, it's not at the individual level. How do organizations really, as a leadership team, nail down and identify what those values are?
We were just doing this work. It's interesting. A lot of organizations now are not just dealing with their core values, they're looking at their vision, they're looking at their mission or purpose. We all call it sometimes different things. And that tells us where we're going, that tells us how our organization is going to get there, like what we do. But how we work day to day is equally important. So I think a lot of organizations right now are spending time, and they usually get their leadership team together and start with that piece. And they identify what I usually recommend is only 5 or 6, not 15 organizational values. What's important for organizations when they do this, though, if they just come up with like 5 words, collaboration, change, excellence, and put them on a wall or put them on a website, that's really not going to get them anywhere. Organizations have to be able to describe what each of those values means. And if they really want to have impact on their culture, they need to let employees at all levels explain, what does trust look like for me as a frontline worker? What am I saying or doing in this job that is living the value of trust for my organization? So it's a lot of work. I think when an organization wants to just pick them and move on, it's not really going to get them any of the results or outcomes they're looking for.
Mhm. It sounds like it's not just you have to identify, you have to, like you said, embrace and you have to live those core values as an organization.
Absolutely. If we stop at naming, it's not even worth doing the work, to be honest. You have to do the, what do I say and do as a person or organization that supports this value? What do I say and do as an organization or person that derails this value? And people have to understand it at that level, and organizations have to understand it at that level for it to have get any results or impact around it.
Mhm. And for organizations or really individuals that are finding that perhaps their values are not aligning with the organization's values, kind of what are some steps that they can take?
I think at an individual level, I think after we become aware of what they are, I mean, like you said, we take individuals through, let's name them, which is hard. I hand people 120 of them. It's a process. Then we talk about what behaviors support and derail them. You're right. The next question is, if I'm feeling stressed, deflated, not where I need to be in my career, what next? What's next? What now? Usually you want to start with your manager if you can, or your direct, supervisor, and you want to have a conversation about how your portfolio of work is, and is there room to move and change it. And if you're able to go to that meeting with some ideas around, look, I love collaboration, it's one of my core values, is there opportunities in my role to do more of that and a little bit less of that, and how can we creatively do that so I'm having greater impact, I'm more engaged, and I feel more committed in the end.
Mhm. I love the fact that like these are now conversations and you're
Oh,
putting the power into the individual's hands to have that conversation. So instead of feeling like they have to leave and that's the only option, you're giving them another choice.
yeah, I think that I mean, that's the engagement you want. You want to be able to, have employees or staff or direct reports that are engaged. We're all worried about losing high skilled workers. We had the great resignation. So most leaders and managers are aware of this, I hope. And so I think when an individual contributor or a team member comes to their boss and has these conversations, I think most individuals will understand, wow, I need this person to be engaged. I need them to want to stay. I can't afford to lose them. So when they have that conversation, as you said, with their boss, when they're able to frame it in terms of, I want to be more engaged, I want to deliver even, better results for you. Let me tell you what drives me, where I lose like sense of time, where I feel purpose and meaning, and I want to go the extra mile and I want to do more. That's a really healthy conversation to have with your manager.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for really being here today and talking about these conversations that we can feel empowered to have with our direct leaders and really the impact that values play on directing and influencing our choices.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.